The cabin smelled of pine and Adam's cologne, two scents that had become my personal perfume of freedom. I stretched lazily across the rumpled sheets, watching him make coffee in the small kitchenette, his bare shoulders moving with practiced ease. 4 days of this bliss, and I still couldn't believe how perfectly everything had fallen into place. "David texted again," I said, waving my phone dismissively. "Poor thing is so worried about me taking care of my sick sister." I couldn't help the smirk that spread across my lips. The elaborate lie had been my masterpiece, complete with a fictional diagnosis, carefully researched symptoms, and a performance worthy of an Oscar. Adam turned, coffee pot in hand, that wicked grin I'd fallen in love with lighting up his face. "You're terrible," he said, but his tone carried admiration, not judgment. "The man actually believes you're playing nursemaid while you're here with me." "He's pathetically trusting," I said, accepting the steaming mug he offered. "Always has been. 20 years of marriage, and he still thinks I'm the devoted wife who puts family first." The coffee was bitter, but not as bitter as my contempt for my husband's naive faith in me. I'd been planning these getaways for 3 months, laying the groundwork. David's emotional weakness made him the perfect mark. Every fake tear, every manufactured crisis, every family emergency had been met with his unlimited support and understanding. He'd even offered to come with me to help care for my sister, which had required some quick thinking to decline without raising suspicion. "Tell me again how you managed the medicine angle," Adam said, settling back into bed beside me. His wife Linda was equally gullible, equally trusting, equally deserving of what we were putting her through. "Simple," I said, running my finger along his chest. "I bought everything the internet said she'd need for her condition, took pictures of the receipts for David, then returned it all the next day. He's been sending me money for her care these past few months." The cruelty of it sent a thrill through me. David, working overtime to pay for medicine that would never be used, for a sister who wasn't even sick. The morning light filtering through the cabin windows cast everything in a golden glow, as if the universe itself was blessing our deception. This place had become our sanctuary over the past 3 months, our escape from the mundane lives we'd been trapped in. Here, I wasn't Sarah, the dutiful wife who pretended to care about David's boring work stories and watched him fall asleep in front of the television every night. Here, I was alive. "When do you think you'll leave him?" Adam asked, a question that had become our favorite topic of conversation. The fantasy of our future together, free from the anchors of our respective spouses. "Soon," I promised, though I hadn't quite worked out all the details. David would be devastated, of course, but that wasn't my problem. 20 years of pretending to be grateful for his steady job and reliable nature had earned me the right to choose passion over security. I just need to time it right, make sure I get my fair share of everything. I practiced my returning performance in the bathroom mirror while Adam showered, perfecting the look of exhaustion that came from 4 days of caring for a dying relative. The bags under my eyes needed to look heavier, my shoulders more slumped. David would greet me with flowers, he always did after my sacrifices, and I'd play the tired martyr, graciously accepting his praise for my devotion to family. "You've done something wonderful," he'd say, pulling me into one of his suffocating hugs. "Your sister is so lucky to have you." If only he knew that my sister was perfectly healthy and probably at her book club right now, completely unaware that she'd been fictionally dying for the past 3 months. The phone call came easier than I'd expected. My voice naturally found that exhausted, emotionally drained tone that David always fell for. "David?" I said, letting a slight tremor creep in. I think I can finally come home." "Oh, sweetheart." His voice was full of concern and relief. "How is she? How are you?" "It's been rough," I said, catching Adam's eye as he pulled on his shirt. He made an exaggerated, sad face, mocking David's concern. "But she's stable now. The doctors think she's turned a corner." "Thank God," David said, and I could hear him choking up. Pathetic. "I've missed you so much. I was so worried about you carrying all that stress alone." "I'll be home this evening," I promised. "I just need to pack up and say goodbye. This has been difficult." After I hung up, Adam and I dissolved into laughter. The man actually cried with relief. In a few hours, I'd walk through my front door to find David waiting with dinner prepared and flowers on the table, ready to pamper the wife who'd sacrificed so much for family. And in a few weeks, when my sister needed me again, I'd return to Adam's arms. 4 perfect days of freedom, and now I'd return to my cage, but only temporarily. Soon, very soon, I'd be free forever. The rain started as we loaded our cars, fat drops that splattered against the cabin windows like bullets. I should have taken it as an omen, but I was too busy savoring our last moments together, too drunk on the success of another perfect deception to notice the universe turning against us. "Linda probably has dinner waiting," Adam said, loading his overnight bag into the trunk. "She's been texting me pictures of her cooking experiments all week, as if I care about her sad little attempts at being Martha Stewart." I checked my watch. Plenty of time to get home, shower off the scent of Adam and the cabin, and slide back into my role as David's devoted wife. "David's probably pacing by the window," I said. "He always does that when I'm coming home from family emergencies, like a faithful dog." We'd already planned our next meeting, 3 weeks from now when my fictional aunt would need surgery. David never questioned the frequency of my family's medical disasters, never wondered why my relatives always seemed to have emergencies when he was traveling for work. But when I turned the key in my ignition, nothing happened. The silence was deafening. I tried again, pumping the gas pedal, willing the engine to catch. Nothing but a pathetic clicking sound that might as well have been my heart stopping. "No," I whispered, then louder. "No, no, no!" Adam appeared at my window, concern replacing his usual smug confidence. "What's wrong?" "It won't start," I said, panic already creeping into my voice. I checked my phone. I was supposed to be home in 4 hours. 4 hours to make a 3-hour drive. "Fix it. You have to fix it." He popped the hood with the kind of masculine confidence that usually impressed me, but I could tell immediately from his fumbling that he had no idea what he was looking at. His hands moved randomly among the wires and components, like a child playing doctor with a real patient. "Maybe it's the battery," he said uncertainly, "or the starter." "You don't even know what you're looking for." My voice was climbing toward hysteria. Every minute we wasted here was another lie I'd have to construct, another detail to manage. "David's expecting me. I can't just disappear for another night." The rain was coming harder now, soaking through Adam's shirt as he bent over the engine. "We'll figure this out," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Worst case, you take my car, and I'll deal with getting yours fixed." Except when we turned to his BMW, we found the rear tire completely flat. "This can't be happening," I said, staring at the deflated rubber like it might reinflate through sheer force of will. "This cannot be happening." Adam knelt beside his car, running his hands through the rain-soaked hair. "The spare," he said. "I'll change the tire." But when he opened the trunk, we discovered that his spare tire was flat too. Worse, the jack and lug wrench were missing. "Who doesn't carry emergency tools?" I screamed at him, not caring that the rain was plastering my hair to my skull or that my expensive sweater was becoming see-through. "The dealership must have forgotten to put them back after the last service," he said weakly. "Linda usually handles all that maintenance stuff." Linda. His wife, whom he mocked constantly, but who apparently managed the practical aspects of his life that he was too important to handle himself. I wanted to hit him. Standing in the pouring rain beside 2 useless cars, I felt my carefully constructed world beginning to crack. This was supposed to be simple. 4 days of passion, followed by a seamless return to my cover life. Instead, I was stranded in the middle of nowhere with a man who couldn't even change a tire. "We have to walk," I said finally. "Back to town. Find help." The walk was 3 miles of hell. My designer shoes, chosen to look appropriately worn for my performance as the exhausted caregiver, were never meant for hiking through mud and puddles. My phone died somewhere around the 2nd mile, its screen going black just as I was trying to calculate how many more lives this delay would cost me. The trucker who finally stopped was a godsend wrapped in flannel and kindness. His name was Bill, and he assumed we were a married couple who'd broken down in the storm. He clucked sympathetically about the weather and shared stories about his own wife, while his CB radio crackled with traffic reports. "Y'all look like drowned rats," he said cheerfully. "Don't worry, I'll get you to town." These things happen to the best of us. If only he knew he was helping 2 of the worst. By the time we reached town, found a mechanic, and arranged for our cars to be towed and fixed, it was past midnight. I'd missed my arrival time by 8 hours. 8 hours that David would want accounted for. 8 hours that would require explanations I hadn't prepared. Sitting in the mechanic's waiting room, still damp and shivering, I tried to construct a story that would explain the delay. A medical emergency at the hospital. Car trouble in the rain. Getting lost in an unfamiliar area. Each lie felt thin, transparent, inadequate. Adam sat beside me, no longer the confident man who'd mocked our spouses that morning. He looked as desperate and frightened as I felt. Our perfect crime had become a disaster, and we both knew it. "What are you going to tell Linda?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe that I helped someone with car trouble and lost track of time." The panic in his voice matched my own. For the first time since this affair began, we weren't the clever ones, the ones pulling strings from the shadows. We were exposed, vulnerable, scrambling to cover our mistakes. When I finally called David at 2 in the morning, my voice shaking from exhaustion and fear, I knew I sounded different. Not like a tired caregiver, but like someone whose world was falling apart. "Sarah? My God, where are you? I've been calling and calling." "I'm sorry," I said, and for the first time in months, I actually meant it. The for sale sign stabbed into my front lawn like a gravestone marking the death of everything I thought I knew. The red letters seemed to glow in the afternoon sun, announcing to the entire neighborhood that the life I'd taken for granted was over. My hands shook as I parked in the driveway of what was apparently no longer my home. The house looked the same from the outside, same pristine landscaping I'd spent years perfecting, same white shutters I'd insisted David repaint last summer. But something felt fundamentally wrong, as if I were looking at a movie set instead of my real life. The silence inside was the first thing that hit me. Not just quiet, silence. The kind of profound absence of sound that comes when a house has been systematically emptied of everything that made it alive. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors as I moved through rooms that seemed too large, too clean, too deliberately arranged. The family photos were gone. 20 years of Christmas mornings, anniversary dinners, vacation snapshots, all of it vanished as if our marriage had never existed. The mantelpiece where our wedding picture once sat now held nothing but a thin layer of dust in the exact shape of the missing frame. David's study was completely empty. His desk, his books, his computer, his collection of vintage fountain pens I'd always found pretentious. Everything that had made that room his sanctuary was gone. Even his motivational posters about persistence and integrity had been stripped from the walls. The envelope sat alone on the kitchen table like a white flag of surrender. My name written across the front in David's careful handwriting, the same script that had written me love letters when we were young and still believed in forever. "Sarah, by the time you read this, you'll have noticed some changes. I hope you'll forgive the dramatic presentation, but I felt our situation called for something more memorable than a simple conversation. I know about Adam. I've known for 3 months. The words hit me like a physical blow. 3 months. The entire duration of our affair. I sank into the kitchen chair, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. 3 months meant he knew from the very beginning, had been watching and planning while I thought I was being so clever. I know about the cabin you've been meeting at. Beautiful place, by the way. Linda and I particularly enjoyed watching you through the windows last week. You should really check for sightlines before planning your romantic getaways. Linda, Adam's wife. My vision started to gray around the edges as the implications crashed over me. They knew. They both knew. They'd been watching us, probably laughing at our arrogance. You probably think you're very clever with your stories about family emergencies. Your healthy sister sends her regards, by the way. I had coffee with her yesterday. She was quite amused to learn about her fictional medical crises. Did you know she's thinking of writing a book? You might have inspired her to try fiction. The casual cruelty of his words was stunning. This wasn't the David I'd married, the emotionally weak man I'd been manipulating for months. This was someone else entirely, someone calculating and strategic and utterly without mercy. Linda discovered Adam's affairs. Yes, plural. You weren't his first. About the same time I figured out yours. Amazing how betrayed spouses can find each other, isn't it? We've spent the last 3 months planning your joint goodbye present. You'll find your personal belongings in trash bags by the garage. I kept what I thought had sentimental value, though I realize now I may have misjudged what actually matters to you. The bank accounts have been closed and the assets transferred to a series of trusts and offshore holdings that will take your lawyers approximately 7 years to unravel, assuming you can afford lawyers. My mouth went dry. The money. Our money. 20 years of building a life together, of shared investments and careful planning, all of it gone because I'd underestimated the man I'd thought was too weak to leave me. The house sold yesterday to a lovely young couple who remind me of us when we first got married. They believe in things like commitment and honesty. I hope they have better luck with those concepts than we did. Linda and I discovered we have quite a bit in common beyond unfaithful spouses. We're starting fresh somewhere warm, where the cost of living is reasonable and the extradition treaties are complicated. I'm sure you understand the appeal of a fresh start. You've been planning one yourself. Thank you for showing me what I actually deserved all these years. It wasn't devotion to someone who saw me as pathetically weak, or loyalty to someone who found my trust contemptible. It was someone who could match my intelligence and appreciate my planning skills. Consider this my resignation from the position of convenient husband. I'm taking your advice and choosing passion over security. The utilities will be disconnected tomorrow. I suggest you make other arrangements. David. P.S. Linda says Adam should be receiving a similar letter about now. She's always been better at timing than you gave her credit for. I stared at the letter until the words blurred together, reading it again and again as if repetition might change its contents. The man I'd lived with for 20 years, the man I'd dismissed as emotionally weak and intellectually inferior, had orchestrated a revenge so complete and devastating that I was still discovering its scope. The trash bags by the garage contained exactly what he'd promised. My personal belongings, my clothes, my jewelry, my books, my laptop, everything that was mine and nothing that was ours. 20 years of shared possessions had been divided, and I'd received exactly what I'd contributed, almost nothing. Sitting among the garbage bags in what used to be my garage, I finally understood the man I'd married. Not weak, strategic, not trusting, gathering evidence, not pathetic, patient. I'd been played by a master, and I never even knew the game had started. Adam's call came at 3 in the morning, waking me from my first real sleep in 48 hours. I'd been camping in a cheap motel room, surrounded by trash bags full of my former life, trying to process the scope of David's revenge. The sound of my phone was like a lifeline. At least someone else understood what I was going through. Sarah? His voice was rough, desperate, nothing like the confident man who'd made coffee in our cabin just days before. Did you get a letter? You too? I asked, though I already knew the answer from the broken sound of his voice. Linda's gone, he said. Everything's gone. The house, the accounts, my business assets, all of it. She cleaned me out so thoroughly I can barely afford this phone call. There was a bitter satisfaction in hearing his pain, even though my own situation was just as desperate. How long did she know? 3 months, according to her letter. Same as David, apparently. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. She said they've been planning this together. Our spouses, the ones we thought were too boring and trusting to see through us, they were working together this whole time. The image of David and Linda meeting secretly, sharing information about our betrayals, planning our mutual destruction with the same careful attention we'd given to our affair, it was almost admirable in its completeness. Almost. What did Linda's letter say? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. That I was a cliché, Adam said bitterly. A middle-aged man having affairs to feel important, while she handled all the real responsibilities. She wasn't wrong. I don't even know how to access half my own accounts. She always managed the finances. At least you had business assets, I said. David convinced me to put everything in joint accounts years ago. Said it was more romantic, more trusting. I thought he was being sentimental. We underestimated them, Adam said, and I could hear him pacing. I keep thinking about that night at the cabin when we were laughing about how simple they were, how easy it was to fool them. They were probably watching us then. The thought made my skin crawl. Every intimate moment, every cruel joke about our spouses, every plan we'd made for our future together, all of it performed for an audience of the people we'd been betraying. We'd been specimens in a terrarium, thinking we were predators when we were actually prey. This is your fault, Adam said suddenly, his tone shifting to accusation. If you hadn't insisted on staying at the cabin an extra day this time, if you'd left when you were supposed to, we never would have been caught in that storm. David wouldn't have gotten suspicious about the delay. My fault? I felt my own anger flaring. You're the one who couldn't fix a car or change a tire. You're the one whose emergency equipment was missing because your wife had to handle everything practical in your life. At least I was planning to leave Linda, he shot back. You were just playing house, keeping David around for security while you had your fun. You never intended to actually leave him, did you? The accusation hit too close to home. The truth was, I'd been comfortable with the arrangement. Adam for excitement, David for stability. I'd had no real timeline for leaving my marriage because I'd been getting everything I wanted from both relationships. You don't get to judge me, I said. You were married for 15 years and this wasn't your first affair. Linda's letter said affairs, plural. At least I was only cheating with one person. That you know of, Adam said cruelly. Maybe David wasn't the only one watching. Maybe you weren't as special as you thought. We were both breathing hard now, our conversation devolving into the kind of vicious blame assignment that happens when people realize they're drowning together and there's only one life preserver. The lawyers said it could take years to unravel what they did, Adam continued. Shell companies, offshore trusts, international transfers. They didn't just take our money, they made it disappear. Linda must have been planning this for months, setting up the legal structures, preparing the paperwork, and I never saw it coming because I thought she was too stupid to understand complex finances. David's letter said 7 years, I added. 7 years to maybe, possibly, get some of it back. If we can afford lawyers that long. I can't even afford a security deposit on an apartment, Adam admitted. My credit's destroyed. They froze everything and reported the accounts as fraudulent activity before transferring the assets. I'm living in my car until I figure something out. The conversation continued for another hour, circling through blame and desperation and the growing realization that our affair was over. Not just paused or interrupted, completely finished. Whatever connection we'd shared had been built on our mutual sense of superiority over our spouses, our shared secret that made us feel clever and special. Without that, we had nothing. We were just two middle-aged people who'd destroyed our lives for a fantasy. And now that the fantasy was over, we couldn't even stand each other. "I never want to see you again," Adam said finally. "This whole thing, it was a mistake. A stupid, expensive mistake that cost me everything." "Agreed," I replied. "Lose my number." He hung up without saying goodbye, leaving me alone in my motel room with the sound of trucks on the highway and the weight of my complete isolation. No husband, no lover, no home, no money, no friends who didn't know what I'd done. David and Linda had given us exactly what we'd given them: abandonment, betrayal, and the discovery that the person they'd trusted most in the world was someone else entirely. 6 months later, I stood behind the counter of a fast food restaurant, wearing a polyester uniform that smelled like grease and disappointment, watching customers who probably made more money than me ordering lunch they'd forget by dinner. The name tag pinned to my chest said Sarah in cheerful red letters, but I felt like someone else entirely, a shadow of the woman who'd once mocked her husband's trusting nature while planning her sophisticated escape. The studio apartment I could barely afford sat above a laundromat, its single window facing a brick wall. At night, I fell asleep to the sound of washing machines and woke up to the smell of industrial detergent. The trash bags of belongings from my old life had been unpacked into a space so small that everything I owned fit in 2 dresser drawers and a narrow closet. Adam and I had lasted exactly 2 weeks after our phone call. He'd shown up at the motel one night, desperate and drunk, wanting to rekindle what we'd had. But without the thrill of deception and the shared contempt for our spouses, we had nothing to talk about. Our last fight had been about money, specifically his assumption that I had access to resources I didn't possess. He'd called me selfish for not helping him, and I'd called him pathetic for expecting me to. We'd parted with the kind of mutual hatred usually reserved for divorced couples fighting over child support. It was the postcard that finally broke me. It arrived on a Tuesday, mixed in with bills I couldn't pay and credit card offers I didn't qualify for. No return address, just a tropical postmark and a photograph of 2 silhouettes walking on a beach at sunset. The figures were too distant to identify clearly, but I knew immediately who they were. The back contained a single line written in 2 different hands. "Thanks for showing us what we deserved." David's careful script and Linda's flowing cursive, intertwined like their lives had become. The same message, shared responsibility, unified purpose. They'd found each other in our betrayal and built something real from the ruins of our deception. I held the postcard for a long time, studying the image of 2 people walking together toward a horizon I'd never see. Somewhere warm and distant, the people I'd dismissed as boring and simple were living the life I'd thought I deserved. They had love, security, freedom, and each other. They had everything I'd wanted and thrown away. The worst part wasn't the poverty or the loneliness or the humiliation. The worst part was the growing realization that David had been right about what I deserved. Not the comfortable life I'd taken for granted. Not the passionate affair I'd thought would set me free. But exactly this. The consequences of my choices. The price of my deception. The perfect justice of losing everything to the people I'd underestimated most. I still kept the postcard, tucked into the corner of my bathroom mirror where I could see it every morning. Not as punishment, but as a reminder that some lessons can only be learned the hard way, and some prices can only be paid in full. David and Linda had taught me what I actually deserved, and they'd been absolutely right. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.